Hello, everyone. We're doing things a little bit differently today. You might notice that if you're watching this episode, we're in a couple different outfits, and that's because with the current events going on in the Middle East, particularly the war between Israel and Hamas, Alex and I decided that we wanted to talk about how it made us feel, and we wanted this episode to be as current as possible. So that is why you will notice at the end of the episode, we will have changed outfits because we're swapping our working on the dad bod segment. But thank you all for understanding. I know this one's a little different, but the show will continue as usual. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Working on the Dad Pod. As always, I am Ethan, and this is my co-host, Alex. And today we're going to talk about what it is like to parent in tough times. We'll get a little more into what that means as we introduce the topic later on. But this is a normal episode. We just want to keep things as they are. So I just want to say, Alex, how are you doing today? And are you going to start with your win or your loss?
I am doing pretty good. It's been a odd week for a variety of reasons, sure. Not the least of which are, some of the things that are inspiring what we'll talk about, and what Ethan's talking about parenting in, less than optimal conditions. I think we're talking about when factors outside of your control, global factors, sort of change and hit you in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's been a lot going on, but it's been a pretty interesting week. But my win, I will go ahead and start off with my win. And it's something that I noticed tonight, and I was really appreciative of tonight as the kids were hanging out. They were home pretty much all afternoon. My daughter was home sick today. She woke up. She had a slight fever, like 99.9, didn't feel well. We didn't send her to school. And it's just one of those things where we took her to the doctor. She tested negative, ran the gamut of tests. She tested negative for everything that's ever been conceived, every 3-letter, 5-letter acronym of everything. But she just wasn't feeling well. So we had both of our kids home. She didn't go to ballet this afternoon. But my son and my daughter spent an hour and a half just like running around the house playing together without any major incidents, without any major things going on. And it was really nice because my wife and I were very worried. Today was not a day that we had childcare lined up. We're still, I think, about a week away from my mother-in-law getting back into town, which gives us sort of that 5 days a week grandma coverage on the weekdays for healthy kids that go to school. And so we're not quite there yet, but we were very worried about having both kids home. And it's like, okay, usually I drop my daughter off at ballet and my son and I maybe run and pick up extra milk or eggs or something that we need more groceries of to kill the 45 minutes of the class. But today they did a great job. And I think what's really happened is my son has gotten to an age now where he can say no. He can say, ow. He can say these kinds of words that aren't just like crying and my daughter running out and going, I don't know. Like he can kind of warn her. And so it's not just like big sister just absolutely physically dominating him in some way and then being like, I don't know what happened. Right. And I think that has helped them learn to play together a little bit better. He can say, one word here and there and sort of vocalize a little bit better what he wants instead of just grunts and points. Excuse me. And so that has really helped with our, I think, peace of mind in the evenings that the kids like want to play together and they do play together. And it's not without error. It's not like my kids are just always playing nicely and not stealing things from each other and not making each other cry or making each other frustrated, but it's just getting better and we're in a nice little sweet spot. How about you?
Nice. I'm going to do a hashtag winwich, a win-loss-win. And you'll see that. So I want to start with the first bread of the Winwich, and today is October 12th. This last weekend, my wife and I actually went away for the first time, both of us. I've been away, she's been away. We went to a wedding. Um,
Woo!
and yeah, the first night was a little difficult because our 1 year old didn't sleep the best, but my mother in law watched the kids. They made it to where they needed to go on time. We had a great time at the wedding. And overall, we felt good. It was also my birthday weekend, so it was just it
Happy
was just.
belated.
Thank
I
you.
know
It
I
was
told
just
you on your birthday, but happy
yes.
belated
Thank you,
live on the
thank you.
podcast.
Right, appreciate it. So yeah, so that was just nice. And I wanted to say, like, that first time you both go away. I know you guys have been doing it a lot longer, and that's you've got the different support system than we do. But it was
Yeah.
really nice to have the opportunity to go. And like, I'm glad we did it. You never forget your first time. And and yeah, I'll go right into. I'll continue, and then you can end it. So my loss actually happened within the last 90 minutes.
There you go.
So every night, or most nights, we bathe the children. And sometimes the older daughter, the one who's almost 4, she prefers baths. Our 1 year old hates baths. So she's in the bath and my wife's giving her the bath. And I, in the other bathroom, have the 1 year old in the shower, where I wash her hair, gravity cleaning, good stuff.
Sure.
So, I had just washed her hair and I was beginning to wash her body and I noticed some blood on my arm. And I was like, I wonder if I'm bleeding because I had earlier popped a zit. So I was curious, did the zit start bleeding? No. And I heard my little girl crying, but of course we were in the water, so I could not see what was happening. Turns out that either my wife or I was my wife. They put my razor that I keep in the shower. It must have fallen, and she put it on the holder, or where we keep the toiletries and stuff.
Oh,
and it was up. It was upright, and I guess in the flailing of the arms, I guess my baby cut her finger. And it was bleeding like crazy, and I felt terrible. Sure. I'm calling my wife's name because she's covered in shampoo. I'm all wet. I literally took her finger and I put it right here. For those of you not watching, I put her finger in between my lips to try to stop the bleeding, but also then I was vampiring, drinking her blood and whatever. So that was probably not the smartest thing to do for me. But anyway. Yeah, so she was crying. It was bleeding. She's a baby, so band-aids weren't really great. So that was heightened emotions. My toddler's asking, why is the baby crying? And the baby's screaming in our ears. And I'm like, please wait, please wait. Lost my cool, yelled at her about being patient. Wasn't my best moment.
Yeah.
The reason I'm calling this a Winwich is because later in the evening, once my baby calmed down a bit, obviously she kept playing with the Band-Aid because it was a new sensation. But she was calm. I'm sure it still hurts a little bit, but we were at the point of bedtime where we separate the girls in rooms. One goes, we always do it in the almost 4-year-old's room, and then my wife takes the baby to nurse, and that's when bedtime really happens. And my wife went to the bathroom, and it was just me and the girls, and she starts crying and tries to put her Band-Aid finger in her mouth, and my older daughter puts the pacifier in her mouth, holds her hand, and says, I know it hurts, but it's okay. And it was just such a wonderful big sister moment. I almost cried. I'm almost crying now talking about it. But it was it's those moments where, even at your worst, sometimes you feel like you're doing a good job with your kid.
Yeah.
So that was my
Yeah.
win.
That's a tough little moment. But back to your sort of first win, I will say, and maybe you feel this way, but it's how my wife and I felt. We left our daughter with my mother-in-law several times before her first birthday, including when she was 6 weeks old, which
I
was
remember.
absolutely tough, right? It was a mutual friend's wedding. It was up in New York City. It was in December. And we had no interest in bringing a 6 week old to New York City, maybe ever, but definitely not in December, and not having to like Uber around from place to place with a car seat and strapping that in. My wife and my now almost 5-year-old daughter, are going back to New York City, my daughter's first time in a few weeks, and they're not even taking a car seat. Like, she's pretty tall, and it's actually legal for her to, go from place to place in an Uber real quick without a car seat. So they're actually taking that adventure as a way to like not have to deal with that, because it might actually be chaos. But once you bite that bullet, right, of leaving your kid with somebody else for an overnight, I feel like the weight gets lifted because it feels possible, right? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you're going to do it
Yeah.
every weekend, but like that first
Right.
time you do it and they survive and everything, they've got all 10 fingers and all 10 toes when you come back. It's sort of like, okay, maybe your daughter didn't sleep that well, but everything worked out
Right.
well
And
enough, right?
and apparently we're the ones who, clearly are make the fingers unsafe.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
So my loss for the week is kind of a weird one, that a phase that my daughter is going through, and I'll try to vocalize as efficiently as possible, but essentially she has gotten in a habit of like being fascinated by the concept of death, right?
Interesting.
And seeing a dead animal or something dying, or being
Hmm.
very interested if there's like if my mom is playing like Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, something like that, and an animal killing another animal. And she quite often like has jokingly over the last, this has only been a couple of weeks now, but jokingly will be like talking about, oh, I'm going to kill you, like kind of thing. And again, she's like 4, and it's unsettling to hear, yes. And I firmly believe, like, trust me, if this keeps up, like, we'll be seeing a professional. But I
Sure.
think it is just very much like an exploratory, like, she does not fully grasp the concept of
Yeah.
death. So I don't think there's any, like, I don't think I'm raising a sociopath, or at least I hope
No,
not. I hope we're not getting back into your hot takes of like she turns 18 and then dun dun dun.
no. I actually think this is pretty normal. I'm
Mhm.
sure every kid, most kids, every is never the right thing to say, but most kids, I think, go through something similar when
Yeah.
when they first understand like the concept of death. I've got vague memories of when I was a kid, not really understanding like what death and like killing was, and
Right.
like asking my parents, like I've got a very specific memory of asking like my mom, like, would you be mad if I killed my brother? And she was like, yeah. so,
Yeah.
so I mean, you know what? I'm not going to say it's normal because I did it, but I'm pretty sure it's not uncommon, and pretty sure your daughter is going to grow out of it, and a professional won't be necessary. But again, I'm not an
Yeah.
expert. I'm just
Yeah.
pretty
I mean,
sure.
we're obviously going to keep an eye on it, but
Sure,
it's been
sure.
one of those things that just feels like it very much unsettles some conversations, where it's just like,
Yeah.
I'll be like, hey, I love you, or you're doing a great job, and she'll just turn around and be like, I want to kill you, and you're just like, what? What?
All
What
right.
is happening? Right? It's just very
Right.
unsettling, where you're like, this is the start of a horror movie, and she kind of
Sure.
laughs it off, and I'm like, what did you say? And she goes, oh, just I was joking. And I was like, don't joke about
Yeah,
that.
it's not funny.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's been my loss. But yeah, topic time. I think you should be the
Yeah.
one to introduce our main topic for the night, since it was your
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. So, all right. So just we'll get into it. It is Thursday, October 12th. As Alex mentioned, I wanted to talk about this because I'm sure you're all aware, especially when you'll be listening to this a week after, in the last today's day 7 of a new war that has just been started. Or no, that's wrong to say. A war has been declared, but this is nothing. This is nothing new. What's going on right now between the country of Israel and the terrorist group known as Hamas is on a 7-day, very heightened level of conflict. Yeah. We're bringing this up because, as parents, some of the stories that we have heard are just truly terrifying on both sides. There is nothing worse than hearing about anybody dying, but specifically children, and then some of the stories, whether they have been officially confirmed or not, about what's happening to young babies, like babies. Very sad, very scary, and this is tough times. The reason I wanted to bring it up to you guys here in the United States is because I received a notification. You received a notification. Our friends from other parts of the country are receiving notifications from school districts talking about heightened security and what's going on and cyber threats and just making us be a little more cautious about what is happening in the world. And as we've discussed briefly on this podcast before, there's already the war in Ukraine. We are on year 4 of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's school shootings that happen all of the time, every day even. And it is a scary time to be a parent. And like Alex mentioned earlier, before we got into wins and losses, this is scary stuff that is out of our control. And all we can really do is go through the day and keep our kids safe, healthy, and happy. And sometimes in doing so, we don't give time to ourselves. We don't allow ourselves the opportunity to talk about being scared. So we come at this from different perspectives, but ultimately we're going to talk about this as the perspective of dads and our situations in which our kids are currently in. So before I get into like my spiel, did you want to add anything else to the intro?
No, I will say, it is a scary time for parents. I'll also add that I am as equally scared of like grappling some of the topics within this topic as I am of the actual topics themselves sometimes. And yeah, it's a topic that needs to come with a lot of tact. And it may be one where I don't have quite as much to say because the very current events in Israel and Palestine, feel like an opportunity for me to do a lot more listening than talking. But I know that it's not just limited to that, because as you said, there are a lot of things that can sort of scare us. So there are some other aspects of the general fear of the things out of your control that I might have takes on, but I also might be sort of casually listening. I'll also admit, if you see me looking off the screen from time to time, I have the Atlanta Braves game on because they are playing right now. And before we get into something hot and heavy, I did want to say I scheduled this recording time when first pitch was scheduled for 6 because I didn't think your Dodgers would get swept and would keep their late game slot that would keep this game hitting the 3-hour mark right about now instead of the 5th inning. So if you see me looking away, it's not me being passive or ignoring Ethan. It's me watching the game a little bit from time to time, but I will give this all the attention that it does deserve.
Yeah. Way to blow it, Dodgers. Anyway, more important things to talk about.
Absolutely. They never led once in that whole series.
It is disgusting. Just truly.
Anyway.
Carry on. Yeah. I was at the wedding and saw that Kershaw gave up 6 runs in the first, but this is not what we're talking about.
No, not that.
You know what? Screw you, Miami Hurricanes too. Anyway, okay. Thank you for giving me that palate cleanser. So as I've mentioned on this podcast before, I am in fact Jewish. I grew up in Los Angeles, in a part of the city that was heavily populated by Jewish people. Um, I never once really feared for my life, and like my parents never really projected any kind of fear about what it means to be Jewish, because we lived in a place that was heavily populated and we felt safe. Um, you know, and but I've always been, I always questioned everything going on in the Middle East, from the creation of Israel to just what is going on today. And um, I am not somebody who is very like outwardly Jewish, in the sense that I don't walk around wearing a kippah. I just present as a white male. And for the most part, that allows me to feel safe. And even though I talk to my kids about being Jewish, we celebrate Hanukkah. And when there's new Jewish holidays, we inform the preschool, because um, they're not a religious preschool in any way, but they encourage you to talk about your backgrounds, so that the whole class can be included and feel educated. And it's very accepting, and we love that. So
Sure.
we do have her share the fact in her class that she is Jewish. So since 2016, my views on being a Jewish American, and now as a Jewish father of two Jewish little girls, it is a little scary, because people are not as subtle as they were 7 years ago about their hate. And, I don't like to bring unwanted attention of myself. We have a mutual friend who takes a very different approach. And I know most people I do know who are Jewish take a similar approach, where they're proud of it. And I'm not unproud to be Jewish. I just don't take every opportunity to showcase it, because you never know who's going to walk by you, especially today, at a time when people are more proactive with their hate. So we don't have a mezuzah hanging outside our house or on our doorway. And for those of you who are unaware, mezuzah is just a little trinket that you put in your doorway. It's to good luck, and it also shows your Judaism. We have a couple in the house in a couple rooms. I know I know people who put them on their front doors. I don't want to bring that kind of attention to my house in case somebody happens to walk by who happens to be anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. So, as parents, our number one job is to keep our children safe and healthy and ideally happy. And there are a lot of parents in the world today who are unable to do that. And it's difficult. It's gut-wrenching. It's awful to hear. And I'm not coming at anybody here with any ideas or advice on keeping your family safe and how one wants to identify themselves. But all I can say is that we record our podcast usually after 9 p.m. when ideally all four of our combined children are asleep.
Right.
And not only is that logistically necessary, but it allows us to be a little more open and honest and vulnerable for all of you that may be tuning in. All millions of you are loyal listeners. I am scared. I worry every day that my kid's school is the next one to have a mass shooting. I worry every day that one of the kids' parents in the class might secretly be anti-Semitic hear that my daughter is Jewish and tell their child that that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that I can project to my kids, especially at
Right.
their current ages of
Sure.
almost 4 and 1, because they're honestly just too young to understand. One thing I did want to bring up as an example is tonight, my wife got a message in the mom's chat from one of the moms who was very unhappy with the fact that the kids all did new cubby pictures and they essentially chose headshots over rainbows they drew with crayons. Now
Okay.
this mother expressed her displeasure in this because she does not want the school indoctrinating pride onto her 3-year-old boy because it conflicts with her faith. One, like, it's a rainbow. They are kids. They are learning about colors. Rainbows are beautiful. Like, this is not a school, like I said, that indoctrinates anything. They celebrate
Yeah.
everyone and everything based on what I just said. And granted, this mom might be somewhat homophobic and anti LGBTQ. There's a chance that there's an overlap there with anti Semitism. And I worry about
Yeah.
that. I worry about what could be
Sure.
said because most people who have hate in their heart have hate for multiple groups. And even though, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, that for the most part, I present as a white man in a world that has white male privilege,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I'm not associated with a minority group, one that traditionally is persecuted every 50 to 75 years throughout our most recent history.
Yeah.
And it does make me nervous. Um, and with everything going on in the world, I wanted to just talk about that tonight and say that it's okay to be scared. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay even to let your kids know you're scared because you want to be honest, you want to be vulnerable, but you also want to keep them happy and innocent. And it's a very tough balance. I want my daughters to be proud of who they are, but I also don't want them to invite danger into their lives.
Yeah.
And today in 2023, I am more scared than I was in 2016, and
Sure.
which is exceptionally more scared than I was in 2015 and everything before. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you for just kind of allowing me to go there.
Yeah.
I tried not to talk too much about the actual conflict and the politics of that conflict, but I did just want to elaborate on what it is like going through my mind right now.
No, and I think it's an important discussion because I think, yeah, it's, I mean, I appreciate you sharing it, right? And I come from a place of like not knowing any of this. I am a cisgendered, heterosexual, white Anglo Saxon Protestant male in the United States of America. I am, I'm from the East Side actually. But thank you for that.
It was a W. It was a W for
Yeah,
wasp.
yeah. I don't think that's what that means, but yeah. So anyway, I don't know persecution in my life, and so I can't sit here and say like I know what it's like to walk down the street and think, like what if people hate me for the way I am, right? Like most all but one of the US presidents has looked a lot like me. right? Most of the people in power look like me. And so it has just never been something that I've had to deal with on that very, very personal level. That said, on the daycare level, and where this has come into play for me recently, and part of the reason why I think Ethan wanted to bring it up is I have mentioned before, all those demographic things about me are true. The daycare we have chosen to put our children in is our local Jewish temple. And so there has been heightened security this week. And as someone who does not have the personal feelings, the personal fears that Ethan does or any other member of any persecuted community does, I am not here to tell anybody that feels over the top. Because it doesn't matter if it feels over the top to me, because I'm not the one persecuted, but basically they've quadrupled armed security. They've had armed security since at least the start of this year, if not the start of the spring semester. So the calendar year. And that's usually one guy. It's now 4. They're bringing in sheriff's deputies, and other private security like they normally have. And it's jarring, to say the least. I don't like the fact that it has to exist, right? I don't love it as a deterrent and a solution. Whether you're talking, and it's not speaking specifically to this issue, because right there they are working on a twofold set of fears. They're working on the fear of a school shooting, regardless of where they are associated, and they are working on hate crimes, right? And it's like they are fighting that on two fronts. The church that we go to, it's 15 minutes away from us, not that far, but it's further away from us. And so we don't send our daughter there, or our son. He's not old enough to go, but we don't send our daughter there for preschool. But they've had to add security measures, right? And that's not religious based where I am in Florida, right? Like, Christians are not being persecuted around these parts. But that's just the school safety thing. So like there's the part of it, it's like, okay, we've got an armed guard, they've added fencing at my church, I see all the preschools going through some measure of this. And it's jarring and it's frustrating and it's disappointing as a society that we have to get to that point to make people feel safe. And so that's been a very jarring thing. But this week, like quadrupling it and having new faces, new armed security, it's like we have the guy, and I recognize the guy and he recognizes me. He's usually the one that's working there full time. His kids used to go to preschool there. He is actually a member of the temple that's associated with. He's heavily invested in, the well-being of the kids. But then you get new faces, and I'm dropping the kids off, and I look like a sweaty mess coming from the gym, and I got this guy just giving me, up and down as I'm walking 2 toddlers up to the door. And I'm just like, you're the one that's new here. But like, this is very jarring to have a new person with a gun strapped to his waist staring me up and down as I walk my kids to the door of their preschool. So that's been the jarring thing for me. And again, I'm not trying to act like I am anywhere on the victim spectrum that deserves anyone's sympathy, but I think it's okay. All I want to tell people is it's okay to not always be comfortable with the solutions, understanding where they're coming from, right? And I'm not saying that I have some better option other than world peace, right? But it is something that can absolutely, just make you uncomfortable. And it has been things, you were talking about the mezuzah specifically. And believe it or not, you've never had a mezuzah on your door. I had it. We've had one on our house from sheer apathy. The previous owner of our house was Jewish. We had it until we painted our house within the last calendar year, right? We moved into this house 5.5 years ago, and we just had the mezuzah that said peace to all who enter here. And it was tie-dye because this dude was an old hippie, and it just sat there. And like every now and then when I see about, anti-Semitic crimes, I would go, what if someone walks up to our door and sees that? Like, what goes through their mind? Like, we're not Jewish, but what goes through their mind when they see that, if they know what that is? And then when we lived in New York City, we also were gifted a mezuzah left on the door from a previous tenant that we were just too lazy to take down. And frankly, we'd probably still have one on there if my wife didn't want to completely take off, refinish, and paint our front door. And so for the first time in a long time, we have not, we didn't have one in our apartment right before our house here in Florida. And we didn't have one on my in-laws' house when we lived there for a couple of months. But those kinds of things that you don't think about as somebody who has never faced persecution, of what other people might think of you just from association or jumping to conclusions because of symbols, and all those kinds of things. So it is jarring. But one thing I wanted to touch on as well is, I think one of the scariest paradoxes that we are living through is the fact that we are in such an age of information, right? We can find information almost instantaneously through social media, through Google. Things happen, they get published. News outlets will publish 2 paragraphs, and then you refresh the link and it's 4 paragraphs, and you refresh it, it's 6 paragraphs. And they're just essentially like updating news as they get it. You go on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, you can find stuff instantaneously. And so it's twofold. It allows you to understand threats, potential fears, potential world news a lot more readily. I remember when we were in elementary school, like, it felt like the primary source of that kind of information was like the evening news. Right. You go all the way back to like JFK's assassination, which is obviously before our time, but like that sort of felt like the mode of getting news out to the world from like the 50s and 60s to the mid to late 90s, right? That was how people got news, or they got the paper in the morning.
Right.
And now we're in an age of information where I can pick up my phone, you can pick up your phone, and I can tell you exactly what's happening in the world in real time. And I think it does 2 things. It gives us that information to make adjustments, to understand, but I also think it magnifies, in some cases, and I'm not saying this is a blanket statement, but it magnifies the potential danger, right?
Sure.
Where like you mentioned school shootings. I'm not afraid of school shootings. Like I very much, we live next to the elementary school my kid is going to go to. Both my kids are going to go to, my daughter going to next year. Obviously, she's already out of school that is adding heightened security and all that kind of stuff. There's a sign hanging from the elementary school, your tax dollars at work, the project, and there's a little secondary sign, enhanced security. Like, that's where they're taking surplus tax dollars to make improvements to the school. They're adding more security measures to the school. So I get it. And it's tough for me to reconcile all this information, all these real fears, because you see school shootings and they get played over on the news over and over again. You get articles about the psyche and the background of all these school shooters, reconciling it with the data that, like, since Columbine, school shootings are down. But we know more about them. I'm not saying that they're where I want them to be. And I'm not telling anybody to be like, oh, feel comfortable. They're actually decreased from where they used to be. But it's this balancing of like the risk that our children are actually facing is extremely rare, yet feels extremely in our face and very possible. Like, statistically rare, but extremely plausible, right? Because you're like, I'm not sure how much I want to take solace in this tiny fraction of a % chance. Because if it's my kid, I don't get to go, well, I played the odds.
Right.
And that is the toughest thing to reconcile, is like calming my anxiety on a day-to-day basis when I see these kinds of things, when they're sending out the letters. And I've seen 4 or 5 of these letters, various points, either messaged directly to me or sent, posted on social media, where school districts across the country, I've seen it from, the Northeast, north of you, You mentioned your school district, where we are in Florida. I've seen it a couple places in between, where schools are enhancing security, and they're saying, while we don't have any imminent threat, it's an abundance of caution, right? And I am just so like, if there was an imminent threat, one, would you tell me? I don't know. And two, like, something is making you do this, right? Something is making you say, we need more security, that this is like an appropriate thing to do. And so it just raises alarm bells, right? And that something could just be like, it's going to make everybody feel safer. But at the same time, it could be an actual potential threat that they're just not going to tell us until there's more material information, if they tell us at all.
Right.
And that's what's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you said. I mean, it's yeah. There's you and I were both studied communications at college, and like you mentioned with the media, they care more about getting it first, saying it first, and pointing out that they'll update with more information later than waiting till everything is right. And unfortunately, bad news is what sells. And yeah, it's you add that together, and you've got a market where you're fear mongering for profit, but it doesn't make the rare occasions and the actual threats of violence any less serious when they happen. And
yeah,
it's just really tough.
yeah,
I think I mentioned in the past that I did not. My wife and I, for logistical reasons, did not send our daughter to the Jewish preschool near us that her cousins actually went to, because one,
yeah,
it would require driving instead of walking. They
yeah,
open later and they end earlier, and
yeah,
so it just wasn't convenient. And it's on days like today, I'm glad on multiple levels we made the choice we did, because I too don't necessarily want to see 4 armed guards just dropping my kid off at school and having to explain why. So it's yeah, it's just a scary time, and I want,
yeah,
like I said, Alex and I aren't necessarily trying to get into the politics of what's going on. We focused heavily today on Judaism and forms of anti-Semitism, but that's just because of current events.
and I think it's because it's something that affects our lives. Like, I would
Yeah,
say, if you are a person of color, right? Um, I think that you have very different concerns on a day
sure.
to day basis, and I think those concerns are valid. But I'd be even more remiss to try and navigate acting like I have anything
And
to talk about with those concerns. I like validating them. That's about all I can
yeah,
do. I can say, I'm sorry that your concerns are valid, and I'm sorry that you feel unsafe. It's the same way when the temple decided to quadruple security. It's the same way of like, I don't feel like my kids are actually any less safe. But again, I'm not Jewish, and the temple congregation that funds this is, they feel less safe, and therefore they are deciding that there needs to be more security, and it's not
right.
my place.
And I and if
Where do you fall on that? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say I appreciate you bringing up um, persons of color, because I I mentioned earlier, I present as just a white male. I'm not
Yeah,
wearing my kippah. I my I am Jewish, but that is not something you can see. I have the ability to decide when and where I want to show my full self. Now, you can call me cowardly, you can call me, unproud or whatever, and I understand why anybody would say that about me. But the truth is, you know, I grew up in America with white privilege as a man, and so it wasn't until recently in my life that I actually felt this kind of oppression, even though and fear, even though I knew it was going on throughout my family's history. I've been
Right.
privileged and lucky that it is something that I don't have to deal with.
Yeah.
It would be much worse if I was a person of color because that's not something you could just turn on and off. You can't take
Yeah.
off your hat and no longer be a person of color. So I do want to. I did want to just say, my position is fear from like privileged but fearful, and like I don't know if that's even a thing, but it is what my emotions are telling me I am right now.
Yeah.
So yeah. But
Yeah.
I wanted to make that distinction, and I think
Yeah. And yeah, and so I think what I just wanted to say, sort of sum up my thoughts on it, is it's okay to not be okay. We sort of mentioned this in our mental health episode, but I think it's okay to be scared from time to time sending your kids to school. I would say it's probably unhealthy to live in constant fear, like active, constant anxiety, right? I think you have
agreed.
to find an for that. You have to talk to somebody about that. You have to do something about that that you can control. But it's okay if you're jarred when you see extra security guards or cops at your kid's school. It's okay to feel jarred if world events make you think that your kid is in more danger. And it's okay to just, it's okay to not be okay, right? No matter who you are or whether you're in a persecuted group or not. Um, I kind of just want to say your feelings are valid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I think there are a lot of things, as I mentioned, that just feel like they are scary and the world is spiraling out of control. And I'm not the one to say it's not, right? Maybe it is. Maybe,
Right.
this is just chaos personified and we're going down a slippery slope. But yeah, I think it's very normal to feel unsettled from time to time about the situation you have to put your kid into. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's going to be like what you and your wife experienced this weekend with leaving your kids um, in somebody else's care, that sometimes you just got to do it and have a little bit of faith that it's going to be okay. Because I think if you react the other way and try to guard them against every single possible thing that's going to happen, you might give yourself more anxiety and more trouble as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
All
All
right.
right.
Working on the dad bod. Time for a little check-in. So I'll do me. Last week I think I was at 182.6. This week I'm at 182.4. Slight progress, but progress nonetheless. I'm never going to be too down about anywhere from a half pound up or down. More than that, then I start looking at like, okay, what happened, all that kind of stuff. But pretty good week for me. I'm actually sort of taking not the week off from the gym, but I'm doing a lot of mobility stuff. I'm just trying to deload because I've been
Mm.
having some sort of like back stiffness, and like instead of just like compounding it, like making sure I get myself right. But I've been spending more time doing cardio, play it like shooting basketball, different
Mm-hmm.
things like that to keep my movement up. But I've backed off the weightlifting this
Okay.
week. How about you?
So last Thursday, we are also recording this on a Thursday. I was 189.4 last week. Today, I am 189.0. I'm attributing that to
Yeah,
the haircut and the shave. I'm juicing these numbers,
there you
getting all
go.
the hair off my body. Definitely don't want to add on those. No, but It was pretty honestly, like I talked last week about how I was going to do better this week. I really didn't do that much better at all. I just, I think I uh, inadvertently ended up moving a little bit around more. And just,
Hey,
yeah. So, but
that's always a big factor.
yeah, so I'm, going to a wedding this weekend. The impetus for the haircut, but I'm also going to a wedding in 2 weeks. So I wanted it short enough where for the next wedding it'll look fine too. So that was,
There you go.
this is budget wedding cutting, if you know what I mean.
There you
So
go.
yeah.
Anyway,
All right. Well, for everybody listening, thank you a lot for going through this episode with us. Hopefully, you'll get to listen to it. We had a couple technical difficulties and see it because I feel like our emotions were shown today.
yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much for working on the Dad Pod with us. And we hope to see you again next time. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.